Hello and welcome to Creepy Crime Cases. Before we begin, if you appreciate deep dives into true crime stories that changed history, please hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you never miss an upload. Thank you for your time. It was supposed to be a night of carefree fun. A chance for a young woman to reconnect with old friends and forget the stress of her demanding life. But as 22-year-old Amy Willard said her goodbyes and walked out into the warm summer night, she had no idea she was being watched. A predator was waiting in the shadows, and her every move was being tracked. This is the story of a brilliant life cut short, a cold case that stunned a community, and the shocking systemic failure that allowed a killer to walk free. The night of Wednesday, June 19, 1996, felt like any other summer night in Wayne, Pennsylvania. The air was warm, and the streets around Lancaster Avenue were alive with the quiet hum of suburban life. For 22-year-old Amy Willard, this night was a precious slice of normalcy. She was at home on summer break from the George Mason University in Virginia, where she wasn't just a student but a star. Amy was a force to be reckoned with on the lacrosse field, a record-breaking player who had earned a few honors on her achievement tab. She was studying physical education, and her heart was set on a future where she could give back to kids by coaching high school sports. But tonight, all of that was on the back burner. That night was about friendships and getting together. She was heading to a bar called Smoky Joe's, a popular local spot, to meet up with a group of her high school friends. These were the people who had known her before college, before the athletic accolades, from her days at Notre Dame de Namur. They knew her as just Amy, the fiercely loyal, kind, and incredibly funny young woman she was at her core. She drove her mother's car, a blue 1995 Honda Civic. It was a familiar drive, about 20 minutes from her home in Brookhaven. She thought about seeing familiar faces, sharing laughs, and catching up on everyone's lives. She arrived at Smoky Joe's around 10:30 p.m. The place was buzzing with energy, filled with other young people enjoying their summer freedom. Shortly after her arrival, she found her friends, and for the next 3 hours, she was just another young woman in a crowd. They talked about everything and anything: old memories, summer plans, who was dating who, as well as anything they could wrap their mind around on that night. It was mindless, easy, and exactly what she needed, but that was the last time anyone will ever see Amy alive. At around 1:25 a.m., the night started to wind down. The bar was closing and Amy decided to say her goodbyes. Her friends offered to walk her to her car, but she declined. She walked out into the parking lot alone, got into the blue Honda Civic, and started the engine. She pulled out onto Lancaster Avenue, beginning the familiar route home. But as she drove, she couldn't have known that her every move was being watched. A stranger had been in that bar, or perhaps in the parking lot, watching her closely. As she drove toward the interstate, heading to the peace and quiet of her home and her bed, the stranger followed her closely. The first sign that something was seriously wrong came from the routine patrol of an emergency ambulance crew early Thursday morning, June 20th. Their job was to rush to emergencies, but this time they found one. It was around 2 a.m., just about 30 minutes after Amy Willard had left Smoky Joe's. As they drove along Interstate 476 in Delaware County, they took the southbound off-ramp to Route 1. Their headlights illuminated something out of place, a car just sitting there. It wasn't parked neatly, it was abandoned in the middle of the exit ramp, as if it had simply stopped and been forgotten. But the engine was running, and that was the first alarming detail. The driver's side door was wide open, casting the interior dome light into a lonely pool of yellow on the pavement. The headlights were on too, cutting through the dark and shining on empty space ahead. It was a 1995 blue Honda Civic. They ran the plates and found it was registered to Gail Willard of Brookhaven. They approached cautiously. The radio inside was still playing, providing a jarringly cheerful soundtrack to a scene that felt increasingly ominous. They noticed a scuff mark on the back bumper. It was fresh, indicating contact with another vehicle. And then, there was blood drops leading away from the open driver's door. Their eyes followed the trail to a small, dark pool on the ground. In the center of that pool lay a tire iron. The sight of that tool, resting amid the blood, shifted the scene from strange to horrifying. The ambulance crew immediately contacted police, and soon the quiet off-ramp was flooded with flashing red and blue lights. Crime scene technicians arrived, taking photographs, measuring the blood spatter, and bagging the tire iron as evidence. They noted the position of the car and the direction of the blood trail. Every detail was part of a puzzle they were just starting to piece together. The finding of Amy's abandoned car sent a wave of fear through the Willard family and kicked off a massive manhunt. Gail Willard, Amy's mother, was at the Jersey Shore when she received the devastating call every parent dreads. She later said that in that moment, she felt a cold certainty wash over her. She knew her daughter was gone. Police, already worried about the worst, expanded their search beyond the off-ramp. Later that morning, near where the Honda was found, they discovered a pair of gym shoes and a pair of female underwear with a sanitary pad attached. The items were quickly identified as belonging to Amy. This grim discovery extinguished any faint hope that she might have somehow survived the attack and wandered off disoriented. It was clear she had been assaulted at the site of her abduction. The question now was where her body had been taken. Later that same day, at around 5 p.m., the horrific waiting ended. Children playing in a vacant lot on 16th Street and Indiana Avenue in North Philadelphia stumbled upon a tragic discovery. Lying face down in the debris was the naked body of a young woman. 2 plastic bags had been placed over her head. The location was less than 20 miles from where she had been taken, showing the killer's cold efficiency in moving and disposing of his victim. The scene was one of deep violation and cruelty. The autopsy report provided a clinical yet horrifying account of Amy's last moments. It detailed a level of violence that was both brutal and personal. The primary cause of death was multiple blunt force injuries to her head, brain, and face, consistent with repeated blows from the tire iron found at the scene. Her skull had shattered in several places. But the violence didn't stop there. She had bruising on her left shoulder and upper chest, likely from the initial impact or from being restrained. A distinct, rectangular bruise beneath her left breast would later be crucial. A patterned burn, described as resembling a flower petal, was on her right lower chest and upper abdomen. Her neck had fractures in several places, and bruising covered her lower body. Most notably, she had defensive wounds on her forearms as well. Semen found in her vaginal cavity confirmed she had been raped, and in a final act of cruelty, a tree branch was forced into her vagina, a detail so shocking and too delicate, it wasn't released to the general public immediately. Importantly, there was no blood pool under or around her body. This fact confirmed what the evidence suggested, that the vacant lot was merely a dump site, and Amy had been murdered elsewhere, probably in a vehicle or at another location, and her body was brought here to be discarded like garbage. In the chaotic aftermath of Amy Willard's murder, the police faced enormous pressure. A beloved local athlete had been brutally abducted and killed, and the public wanted answers. The investigation needed direction, a suspect, someone to blame for this horrific crime. Within just 2 days, it seemed they had found a lead. The first person to come forward in response to police appeals was 23-year-old Andrew Michael Kobuk, the son of a wealthy Bryn Mawr stockbroker. Kobuk was already known to authorities due to his troubling criminal history. He had been arrested for impersonating a police officer, using a blue light on his car to try to pull a woman over. When she stopped, he showed her a badge and forced her out of her vehicle. Fortunately, her gut feeling and quick thinking led her to report him, resulting in his arrest. However, he was never formally charged in that case. This background made him a person of intense interest. The way Amy's car was discovered, with a scuff mark suggesting a forced stop. The link seemed too significant to overlook. Kobuk's actions following the case raised further concerns. He appeared at the scene on I-476 shortly after Amy's car was found. This was not the behavior of a concerned citizen. Investigators viewed it as an unhealthy, possibly voyeuristic, interest in the crime he might have committed. He quickly became the prime suspect. The police acted swiftly, executing a search warrant at his home and, most importantly, collecting a blood sample. For the Willard family, this focus on a single suspect created a blend of hope for justice and fear at the details surrounding him. But the justice system must rely on evidence, not emotion or coincidence, so when the DNA results returned from the lab, it dealt a blow to the investigation's progress. Andrew Kobuk's DNA did not match. Just like that, the most promising lead evaporated. The suspect who had seemed to fit so perfectly was actually a tragic distraction. This exclusion forced the police to recognize they were back at square one, with no viable suspects and a rapidly cooling case. The time and resources spent on the Kobuk lead now felt like a diversion, and the real killer remained unidentified. For the community and Amy's family, the emotional turmoil was overwhelming. The brief sense that an answer was near gave way to the frightening realization that the true monster was still out there, invisible, and the police had no idea who he was or where to search next. The case, once so active, was now ice-cold. For nearly a year, the investigation into Amy Willard's murder was stagnated. The case file collected dust, tips dried up, and the haunting question of who killed Amy Willard remained an open wound for her family and the community. Then, on June 5, 1997, nearly 1 year after Amy's death, an unrelated event in Ardmore, Pennsylvania, disrupted the silence. It started with a frantic 6:45 a.m. 911 call from a terrified woman. A man was trying to break into her third-floor apartment through a bathroom window. Before that, he had been ringing her doorbell continuously. When she answered, she was confronted by a man she did not recognize, who coolly claimed he was lost. Alarmed, she refused him entry and called the police. Officers quickly responded and arrested the man nearby. He had car keys and identified himself as Peter Thomas Love. The keys belonged to a black Honda Civic parked close by. When officers checked the license plates, a discrepancy emerged. The car was not registered to Peter Thomas Love. It was registered to Maria Cabuenos, a 25-year-old from Juanita Park who had been reported missing on March 15, 1997, 8 months after Amy's murder. The man in custody had no ties to her, and his real name was Arthur Jerome Bomer. This arrest was concerning, but it was the link to a missing person that raised alarms. As police looked deeper into his background, another piece of the puzzle fell into place. Investigators recalled a report from a woman named Patty Jordan. Months earlier, she had contacted police after a frightening experience on her drive home. A man in a black Honda had followed her and deliberately bumped her car, signaling her to pull over. Terrified, Patty had refused and wisely memorized his license plate number, AKB 1149. At the time, police checked the plate. It came back registered to Arthur Bomer for a 1993 Ford Escort. When they tried to follow up, the lead went nowhere, as the car involved in Patty's incident was a Honda, not an Escort. Now, with Bomer in custody for the attempted break-in and driving a black Honda linked to a missing woman, Patty Jordan's report gained chilling significance. The method Bomer used on Jordan, bumping her car to force her to stop, fit the profile of a predator's tactic. It matched the method investigators believed had been used on Amy Willard. The scuff mark on her bumper, the abandoned car on the off-ramp, it all aligned. Arthur Bomer was no longer just a parole violator or a suspicious figure in a missing persons case. He became a direct person of interest in the year-old murder of Amy Willard. The breakthrough in the case was not a singular event, it was a chain reaction. A frightened woman in Ardmore, a missing person from Juanita Park, and a brave young woman who memorized a license plate months earlier. These separate incidents converged to lead directly to one man. The cold case was suddenly, and explosively, red-hot. The arrest of Arthur Bomer exposed a troubling past that should have remained hidden. As investigators reviewed his criminal record, a shocking and frustrating picture emerged. He was a violent predator who had been repeatedly failed by the justice system. His troubling behavior began nearly 2 decades earlier in Las Vegas in 1978. There, Bomer got into a confrontation with Larry Carrier over a parking space. For most people, this would lead to an argument, perhaps some shouting, but for Arthur Bomer, it ended in murder. He shot and killed Larry Carrier. Bomer was convicted of second-degree murder and received a life sentence, which should have ensured he would never walk free again. However, in a decision with disastrous consequences, he was granted parole in 1990 after serving just 11 years. The system believed he was rehabilitated and no longer a danger. This was a grave mistake. When Bomer moved to Pennsylvania in 1993, the change was approved by parole officials in both Nevada and Pennsylvania. It was supposed to be a fresh start under supervision. Instead, he was unleashed on a new community. Almost immediately, his violent pattern returned. He was arrested for allegedly pulling a woman from her car and assaulting her outside an American Legion Hall in Willow Grove. He also faced assault charges after a fight outside a bar in Horsham Township. These were serious crimes, echoing his past actions. Each arrest was a clear violation of his parole. They were warnings, a second, third, and fourth chance for the system to rectify its initial error and return him to Nevada to serve his life sentence. Yet, each time, these warnings were ignored. Paperwork went missing, communication between jurisdictions failed, and Bomer was processed through the local system and released back onto the streets. The bureaucratic system was so slow and ineffective that a convicted murderer could slip through the cracks repeatedly. Finally, a warrant for his arrest for violating parole was issued on February 26, 1997. By then, it was too late. He was already in hiding, evading supervision. With Arthur Bomer finally in custody for the parole violation, investigators had an opportunity. They now had a compelling circumstantial link, his method of bumping into cars, and a troubling connection to another missing woman. But to build a murder case, they needed more concrete evidence. They needed either a confession or undeniable physical proof. Remarkably, they got both. The first breakthrough came from Bomer's personal life. Police interviewed his then-girlfriend, Mary Rumor, on July 10, 1997. During their conversation, she revealed that Bomer had confessed to her about Amy Willard's murder. He told her that he had been at Smokey Joe's bar that night and had seen Amy leave. He followed her in his car onto Interstate 476. To get her to pull over, he used a fake police badge, echoing his earlier persona. When Amy, confused and likely angry, asked why she was being stopped, Bomer told Mary that he lost it. He started punching her until she was unconscious. He then moved her body into his own car, a 1993 Ford Escort, and drove her to a secluded, abandoned building. There, he took off her clothes, put them in a trash bag, and discarded them. He callously confessed to raping her and then killing her by hitting her in the head with a hard object. Mary Rumor's statement provided the first insider account of the crime, giving investigators a path to follow. The second breakthrough was the physical evidence. With Mary's statement in hand, police intensified their search for Bomer's Ford Escort. They located it on July 11, 1997, at a repair shop. The car was a treasure trove of forensic evidence. They seized the front Firestone tire and the oil pan from the car's undercarriage. They also took the right front door panel, which had several small, brown stains. Forensic analysis confirmed that the stains were Amy Willard's blood. Her blood was literally inside his car. Next, the tire was analyzed. Its unique wear and tread pattern were compared to impressions found at the abduction site, and they matched perfectly. Then, analysts examined the oil pan. Its distinct shapes and lines were compared to the unusual pattern contusion found beneath Amy's left breast during her autopsy. It was another exact match. The injury on her body was, in effect, a perfect imprint from the underside of Arthur Boehmer's car, placing her in direct contact with his vehicle. Finally, 2 days after discovering the car, investigators obtained a warrant for Boehmer's DNA. The results were conclusive. His DNA profile matched the semen recovered from Amy's body. The case was now solid. They had his confession to a witness, her blood in his car, his tire at the scene, a part of his car imprinted on her body, and his DNA inside her. Every piece of evidence came together into a strong case against Arthur Boehmer. There was no doubt that he was the killer. The trial of Arthur Jerome Boehmer for the murder of Amy Willard started in September 1998 in the Delaware County Court. Due to the heavy pre-trial publicity, the jury was chosen from Westmoreland County in western Pennsylvania and transported in to ensure fairness. The prosecution presented a clear and damaging timeline of the crime, supported by a substantial amount of evidence. They proposed their theory, which indicated that after Amy left Smokey Joe's, Boehmer followed her as she made her way home, rammed her car to force her to stop, and then attacked her with a tire iron on the side of the road. They showed blood evidence from his car, matching tire impressions, the oil pan that matched the bruise on her body, and DNA evidence proving he was her rapist and murderer. They described how he had moved her body in his Escort and discarded it in a lot in North Philadelphia. Throughout the trial, Boehmer's behavior was disruptive and disrespectful. He made inappropriate outbursts and obscene gestures, displaying a complete lack of remorse for his actions and disrespect for the court and the Willard family. His behavior was so disruptive that he had to be physically restrained multiple times. The defense, confronted with overwhelming forensic and testimonial evidence, called no witnesses. They did not have a case to present. On October 1, 1998, the jury announced their verdict: guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder, rape, kidnapping, and abuse of a corpse. In a final, disgusting act that perfectly captured his nature, Arthur Boehmer turned to the grieving Willard family in the courtroom and raised his middle fingers in a gesture of pure hatred. He was later sentenced to death. The end of the trial brought some legal justice, but Amy's story did not end there. Her death revealed a serious flaw in the interstate parole system. In response, lawmakers created Amy's Law, officially known as the Victims of Trafficking and Violence Protection Act. Signed by former President Bill Clinton on October 28, 2000, aimed to prevent the kind of bureaucratic failures that allowed Boehmer to walk free. It holds states financially accountable if they release convicted murderers, rapists, or child molesters who later commit another violent crime in a different state. It aims to ensure that violent criminals serve their full sentences and are not shifted from one state to another, only to become someone else's problem. Amy's legacy also lives on in athletics. U.S. Lacrosse honors her memory with a national award in her name, given to any player that embodies her spirit of excellence, leadership, and dedication. On the exit ramp, where her abandoned car was found, a small roadside memorial stands. It is a quiet, touching spot where flowers are sometimes left, a visible reminder of a vibrant life lost and a night that changed countless lives forever. Arthur Boehmer remains on death row in Pennsylvania. He has never been charged in the death of Maria Cabuenos, whose car he was driving. The system finally worked, but it worked too late for Amy Willard and for Maria. Her story serves as a lasting reminder of the need for vigilance, the importance of a functioning justice system, and the enduring impact one life can have, even in death. With that, we have come to the end of today's episode. I thank you all for being here. Do well to like and share your comments down below. I will be seeing you on our next episode.